Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to another live stream artist chat with the Living Room Community Art Studio. It's so great to have you here. Hello, hello, nice to see you. Okay. Oh, how lovely. Okay, so folks are joining us right now, and that's amazing. I don't know about where you folks are at, but here it's a bit of a gray, cloudy, rainy day in Oshawa, so another great day to stay inside and have a cup of coffee and talk to some amazing creators in our community who are doing extraordinary things with their art, with their voice. And today's guest is the one and only Sarah Larock, aka Sarah Tihane, who you might be able to follow through that name on Instagram to check in with their art. I first met Sarah way back at Camp Rainbow Phoenix. Durham Region PFLAG has this amazing summer camp for LGBTQ plus kids and their allies that they can go to every year and just enjoy having that experience. And that's where I first met Sarah as a founder of Durham Region Writing Rainbow. And from that point on, we've just crossed paths in so many different ways. And if you've ever come to the living room, you know now that Sarah is a bit of a neighbor of ours working down at the ACDR. So why don't I bring on Sarah so they can introduce themselves properly. Let's see what I can do here. Hello, everyone. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, let's see. Let's see if I can, let's see. Sarah, ask to join. Ask to join. Let's see if we can find Sarah. There we go. Waiting for Sarah. Ah!
I did send a request. Are you kidding me? I was like so ready, so on it.
I'm so glad. I had to scroll down a little bit, and then I tell you, this is my first coffee of the day, so I think I'm still waking up. I don't know. How are you?
I'm good. I am very good. I brought my work in progress up so that I don't have to go run downstairs to show everybody when we get to that, which is nice. And yeah, it's been a pretty slow morning. I'm working from home now. So for anybody who doesn't know what kind of work that I do sexual health education and prevention that is youth led. So I do that one of two ways. Youth volunteers who are passionate about the health of their communities and want to empower their peers with sexual health education can volunteer with me and put together programs to do that from peer to peer. Or if you're part of an organization or, a community group like the Living Room and you're a young person, I can come to that group and I can do workshops around different sexual health topics with the group. And the great thing about that is that we have a lot of freedom to do that in whatever medium best fits the group. So as an artist, I love finding excuses to do art at the same time as having a conversation around sexual health. So yeah, that's my deal.
It's a great combo. And you've always been someone who you've been at the growing edge of kind of activism, advocatism, education, awareness, providing people with opportunities to speak their truth and make those links between the things that are important to them and the things that they need that they might not be seeing in their immediate world. Like you've always been doing.
Yeah. I feel like I almost had to because I'm a queer woman and I also am somebody with invisible disabilities. So in order to make the world a more accessible and more accepting and loving place for me, I also have to do that for everyone else who gets, who needs more accessibility and who also is impacted by layers of oppression. Particularly for people who don't necessarily enjoy the privileges I do as somebody who comes from an upper middle class background, who is white and who is grad school level educated. So yeah, I kind of have to make the world a better place for me and also use the privilege I've got to help make it better for other people.
Thank you for that. When did you first know that your art, that creativity was leading you in that direction?
Um, Probably pretty early on. So I've always loved art and made art, but when I was little, I had zero self-confidence whatsoever. And that really didn't change until like my 20s,
Mm.
uh, which people would be shocked to hear because I hid that very well. But so in high school, I I think I was 14 when I decided I was an anarchist. I'm no longer an anarchist, although I think there's still some good ideas there. But, you know, at 14, when I decided I was an anarchist and anti-corporate and like Rage Against the Machine, I started making political art like grade 9, you know. I made art that talked about body image issues, and I made art that talked about, you know, the creeping influence of how advertising both preys upon insecurity and creates insecurity. You know, products that are meant to sell you an identity are meant to make you feel better, also kind of imply you shouldn't feel good about whatever your natural body or skin or self is.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, I was interested pretty early on in communicating and talking back against structures of power with my art, because I was trying to feel powerful
Mm.
and to feel like I had a voice kind of up against these big, overwhelming concepts out in the world. And that stuck with me.
Yeah. You mentioned, you said used the word hiding, which I find really fascinating. I think a lot of the conversations we have at the living room involve, uh, well, one of the things that art does is it makes it more manageable to be seen and heard sometimes without revealing everything about yourself.
Yeah.
It's a way to build safety and connect with others. But again, like you mentioned, for some of us, we have much more privilege in that area. It's not as scary to step out into that.
Yeah, you know, I definitely think that even though I am much more confident and self-assured in who I am as a person, it's still hard to be your authentic self, or to be closer to your authentic self. And I think art is a really great way to try to be, or to try to show people those aspects of yourself, particularly when it's maybe not as safe to do so. Like, I'm very open about, you know, one of my invisible disability things is that I have ADHD. I'm very open about being ADHD and about my needs with that, with regard to that, because I didn't know until I was 26. So I went through all of school, all of university, all of grad school, not knowing. And I don't ever want that for anybody. That was awful. My life is so much better for understanding that my neurology is differently wired in, you know, more ways than I thought. Because I knew I was depressed, but I had no idea about the other needs that I have. So because I'm very open about that and I really advocate for accessibility, sometimes people go, some people don't necessarily know how to interpret that. So sometimes because I might mention that I'm ADHD early on, because I'm used to doing that now, it's kind of like coming out in the first sentence of talking to somebody. It just becomes something that becomes habit.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll see people immediately underestimate my capacity. And that's when I kind of have to come back in with the like, oh, by the way, here's my list of credentials. Take me seriously. Thank you. Which I shouldn't have to do. Like, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter.
Not at all. I encounter the same things in the studio with, well, I think we're at a growing edge now, or I hope we're at a growing edge now within our culture, within our society, where there's more awareness, more understanding about neurodiversity and things like that. But no, who am I kidding? There's not really, is there? No.
It's definitely one of those things that is, it's not linear. Like people tend to think that societal change is a line from like bad to good. And it's not. It's a constantly shifting balance of forces where we are trying to push always for more accessibility and for less oppression, just always. And that's, I think sometimes people find that discouraging. The idea of like the fight never being over can be very discouraging, but I think it really makes me feel good to think about the little victories in my own life. And, we're not omniscient. We can't see the big picture. So the little things that we're doing day to day, whether it's in our art or in our conversations with people we care about, are all little tiny brushstrokes in a much bigger painting. And we just kind of have to have faith that if we're doing our best to be ethical and anti-oppressive, that, we're contributing to that. So.
That was pretty cool. I might turn that into a quote for the
Go for it.
Because that is a huge conversation so many people are having. And hello, everyone. It's that the feeling of, well, there's so much, especially folks, like myself, who are cisgendered white settlers who walk through the world from, that kind of perspective. Like, we're the default. We're it, right? And we may not know that that's what we're doing. But then when suddenly there's this sense of, there's so much. What do I do?
Yeah. Yes. And part of again, when it comes to accessibility, I get very easily overwhelmed sometimes with the bigness of things. Mm-hmm. Part of how my brain is wired is I'm very detail oriented. I love tiny, fiddly little details. I love every single tree. The forest is there. That's fine. So I totally get it. I get feeling overwhelmed and wanting to withdraw from things that are hard and things that are not fully within our ability to control or change immediately. But, kind of breathe through it, sit with the uncomfortableness and focus on like, well, what thing can I do?
Yeah. And working with what you have in the moment. If you recognize something you don't have, then you can learn about it. It's all these pieces, one piece at a time. Yeah.
Yes. And that patience skill and like being okay with being uncomfortable is an everyday practice.
I would suggest that there is an art to sitting with discomfort and learning how to identify it and use it as a tool, not as or within yourself, within myself anyways. When I first realized that, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. This is information. I can use this to do something. I'm not, I'm okay. I'm just uncomfortable. Like that enables, suddenly there's potential. There's opportunities everywhere. And it gives me a reason to learn and to grow and to step into those moments where I can become a better human. Right?
Yeah. I mean, so if we're talking about sort of day at a time, I'm gonna show you my painting because I feel like it actually might sort of illustrate the point well a little bit. So this is me painting over a canvas that I found in the garbage years ago. So it looked completely different before. And it is the first painting I've painted in a long time. Like I've been doing mostly digital art or small scale, paper and mixed media and stuff. So it's been a few years since I've painted anything, never mind something this big. Like this is, it's pretty big. It's probably 4 feet by, 3.5 feet or something. And part of learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable is when I start to get stuck or frustrated. I've painted a detail and I like the detail and then I don't know where to go from there. Being like, okay, I've done enough for today, and putting the brushes down and leaving it somewhere I can see it also really helps. Because if I put it away, then I might be tempted not to think about it, or I might be overwhelmed by the thought of bringing it out again and getting my paints out again and going, oh God, I didn't know what to do last time. I'm still not going to know what to do this time. Whereas if I've got it out, I can, look at it every so often as I walk past it in the hallway or whatever. And I can think, well, maybe I'll put a rock over here, and maybe I'll put a little stream over here, and maybe I'll put some clouds. Maybe I'll put an overhanging tree here in the background. It kind of allows me to break it into little manageable pieces.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very easy for me anyway to start things and to not finish them.
I suspect a lot of the people watching right now can relate to that. And that's part of it, though. It's this part assumptions we make about ourselves based on other stories we've accepted about ourselves and our process. But also, yeah, we can, that's the inner critic, isn't it? That, we can be so incredibly hard and horrible to ourselves. But just being able to keep that image in view is its own idea of kind of like building that, what's the phrase, opening the window of tolerance,
Yeah, exactly.
To build a relationship with what was at first discomfort, but is now something completely different. You've given yourself time.
Yep. I find I also see the same process when it comes to learning about sexual health, where at first, culturally speaking, like those of us in Western culture in North America, we are not culturally comfortable with sex.
What?
Really at all. And, not to say that there isn't a lot of artistic representations of sex in, movies and TVs. Sure, there's tons of that, but it tends to be, either character building or titillation. It doesn't tend to be actually talking about what does healthy sex look like? What does, consent focused, enthusiastic, mutually enjoyable, what does all of that look like? And what does it look like when it's done in a way that reduces your risk? We take like a harm reduction perspective at ACDR. So harm reduction, I'm sure you're aware of it, but harm reduction is the principle that not everyone is able to or willing to sort of be the most safe possible or have the absolute least risk or zero risk. That's not necessarily within everyone's capacity to do so. And we don't know people's reasons for choosing what they choose. So what we do instead is we say, we're going to give the information that is evidence-based. We are going to be non-judgmental. We are going to be accepting and encouraging of all people's orientation or behavior levels. ACE people are real. There are people who are not interested in sex and never will be interested in sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't tell someone what they should or shouldn't do so much as we go, we want to make sure that within everybody's individual capacity and interest, they can make the choice that is the least risk for themselves. So, that being uncomfortable with allowing yourself to be uncomfortable and learn is, I think, a really good step, not just for art, but also for sexual health, is like hearing about people talk about sex and sexuality, even if it's in a very scientific way, can be really uncomfortable because it can make people think about their bodies or think about sex in a way that they're like, that's embarrassing and private, and I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you don't have to, but it could be useful for like just a little bit to just be uncomfortable and learn a little bit, and then maybe put it aside and come back to it later and learn a little bit more, so that if you or someone you care about needs that information later,
right,
you can use it.
And I think one of the approaches, that knowing that you're an artist and that you look for ways to integrate that kind of like that education awareness piece with creativity is I love so much, because I think it is true. We tend to think of things like sexual health as something that happens in maybe a doctor's office or in that horrible phys ed class that so many of us had, and maybe
No.
even know if it's still happening. But like tend to put it in a clinical space, an academic space, rather than in a life space, like a cultural
Right. Yeah.
and so making it easier to have conversations like this is so much, it's so important.
Yeah, I had a really funny moment. I don't want to get myself in trouble, so I won't say who,
Okay.
but someone, I overheard a conversation basically about my approach. And someone was like, why is she, making friends with art studios and art galleries and libraries? Like, why is she doing all of this creative stuff? Like, isn't that how what's the point? Like, why? And it was coming from a place of well-intentioned concern,
Sure.
where it was, the goal is to support people living with HIV or AIDS, which are not the same thing, and to reduce the rate ultimately of new HIV infections. Mm-hmm. And this person was worried that I was maybe drifting off from the point. And I think that is someone whose hand I would like to hold and gently bring with me into the comfortable talk zone and go, hey, have you ever had someone lecture at you about sex? Did that work for you? Like, wouldn't you rather, pick up a paintbrush and like paint some vulvas, or like, have a book circle discussion about a book that has an HIV positive character in it, and then you can talk about their life? Like, wouldn't that feel better?
And maybe make it easier for that person to walk away thinking, oh, this is something I can talk about. This is not difficult to talk about. And what if I can use art as a lens through which to focus that conversation? So it's not just me sitting down with someone and saying, hey, want to talk, like that. There's just more opportunities, more possibilities of entering into those kind of conversations or thoughts.
Absolutely.
If you'd like for me to join you in holding the hand of that person in that conversation.
Anytime.
Because I think, like you said, we are surrounded with images and narratives of sort of hyper, oddly, not necessarily any kind of real sexuality. And it's around, it's everywhere, and we are aware of it from the moment we start consuming culture, and whether it's TV or movies or magazines or whatever, it's out there.
Yeah, and it's mostly like overwhelmingly heteronormative. It is very rare to see portrayals of sex in media that aren't usually straight people, but are usually like a very narrow window of straight people. Like, I think a lot of media, puts people into a pretty small box.
Yeah.
I think visual art is a wonderful space for challenging that. There's a lot of artists who, they're not beholden to Hollywood. So yeah, I think art is a great space to show a much broader range of human sexuality and just make it gayer, make it so much gayer. Yes, please.
Got a magic wand. Is there any one thing that you would, change right away?
In which?
Or make people, or, provide a platform for, is there any one thing that you're like, this is one area that needs to be, visible, needs to be heard, needs to be seen, witnessed?
Yeah, I mean, this, I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but honestly, like the work that I'm doing right now around sexual health education, like I am actively looking for ways to do that better, to do it more creatively, more engagingly. And I think that it doesn't have to be me. I think there's plenty of people out there doing a much better job at sex education than Hollywood or than most curriculums. And and I think that the people doing the work, I would love, get in touch with me, please, because I would absolutely love to give you all a platform that is bigger than the ones you have or that builds on what you have. Because, yeah, I think that I really want everyone to feel good about their sexuality, to know how to engage in sexual behavior in a way that is affirming and positive and safe, or at least safer. And I think it's really, really important. I genuinely do. I have a wonderful, loving family. My parents are Catholic. I grew up Catholic. So the conversations that we had around sex and sexuality were very much framed in a Catholic lens, which I am no longer Catholic. And so as I left the church, I was kind of adrift. I had to really puzzle through it in terms of what does this mean now? How do I approach relationships? How do I approach sex and sexuality? What ethical system do I use to guide me if it's not the one I've grown up with exactly? So, I think a lot about how difficult that was for me and how much shame I had to overcome. And I want to give other people an easier time.
Was there one thing that you remember that kind of saved your life at that time when you found it, you saw it, you were just opened everything up for you in a positive way?
Not really any one thing. I think that I was really lucky that I had a extremely supportive, close-knit group of friends who were all really accepting and open-minded and curious. And many of us also were not straight. And, I also have a cousin who is older than me and also not straight, who was, such a wonderful source of information and support. So I really don't know if it was any one thing in terms of, something outside of my circle of close people. I think it was probably mostly the support and encouragement and affirmation from that close group of friends and family. I also have a younger brother who's just, the sweetest and super supportive and loving. So yeah, I was very, very lucky that I had a supportive network. And that's something else I like to bring to the work that I do, is part of why we do peer-to-peer is because those relationships are what support us in our health decisions and make it possible for us to follow through. It's one thing to know things. It's a lot harder to use your knowledge unless you've got a community around you.
Yeah. That idea of, it's representation on a physical level, not a sort of, it's when you see yourself, you're not alone, even if you don't have a direct connection with that person. That's a beautiful thing that you offer. Can we talk a little bit about Writing Rainbow, even though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So Writing Rainbow is a writing group that since 2011 has been for LGBTQ plus youth. So, and youth for us was up to 29. Same as ACDR, by the way. Youth is 13 to 29. It's a broad range. The leadership team, which is me and 3 other people who I all love dearly, they and I are, we span from 25 to 32 now. So we're not really youth anymore. So we were kind of like, what do we do with this? And we thought about, the original plan was to find young people who are interested in leading it and just handing it over to them and being like, it's all you now. We believe in you. But that didn't really, most people were there for the community of creative people, because we were there to be a community of LGBTQ plus folks who are into writing and to write together and to form a community. So it's essentially a social community goal with a shared interest, that shared interest being creative writing.
Yeah.
And we think that the best way to maybe remain true to that goal, particularly in the absence of any specific people who are interested in taking over the, you know, less creative and more logistical task of running it, we're opening it up to all ages. So because it's pandemic times, don't know when that's going to be, but when we're able to meet in person again, it will be all ages, all LGBTQ plus creative community of writers. So look forward to that.
That's amazing. It's amazing. If I may, to anyone out there watching, if you're interested in this, contact Sarah. Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. You can contact me through my personal, which is the one I'm on here with and is tagged in the post that you made, or through, I don't actually remember what we're Durham Region Writing Rainbow on Facebook and on our website. So,
interest is happening in the comments.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'll, actually, Mary, if you wouldn't mind just like posting or tagging Writing Rainbow maybe in the post with my face, and then people can find it.
I'll do that. Facebook here, everywhere. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
And it's interesting, that creative community is so important, that contact. I've been reflecting just over the life of the living room. So that's what, 6 or 7 years now, and thinking about how much I've learned from community members with that, you know, with that lived experience. There's so much I would not have known. I would not have known how to find this information, or, you know, I'm old, right? So it's not easily if I was out there and engaged in doing, I don't know, cool youth things. But, you know, the studio, people have been so kind and so patient with me teaching. You've been one of those teachers who've helped.
Oh, Mary, no. Mary, no.
Take it back. You haven't done anything at all. No, but you've been amazing. And so again, it's just that beautiful piece about how important it is to see people in ordinary, everyday life, you know, living their lives, speaking their truth, being themselves, creating, connecting through that art.
Yeah. I got a question once from someone that was like, well, why do you need a queer writing group? Like, I'm straight. You saying I can't show up? And I was like, well, I'm not going to ask for your gay card at the door. Like, if you show up, you show up. The reason it's important to have queer spaces, really the reason it's important to have like specific spaces for like queer-led spaces for queer folks, Black-led spaces and events for Black folks, like, it's so important, because then you know what you're walking into, you know you're going to be supported and you're going to be celebrated and you're going to be in a space with people who have shared experiences, so that, you know, if I was just walking into a writing group that was just writing group, non-specific, I don't know if I talk about my story where 2 women are in love, for example, if I'm going to be faced with either outright hatred or awkward silence, which is almost worse. Like, you know, I don't know what kind of reception I'm going to have. Even sometimes like awkward but well-intentioned support, you know, is nice, but it's not the same as people going, I see myself in that story and I can talk to that story and about that story because I see myself in it. You know, that's why it's so important to have specific spaces where, like, sure, allies are welcome. But it's not for allies. It's for the LGBTQ community, and allies are welcome to also participate and support. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's about safety. It's about accountability. It's not. I mean, again, people, if they've not experienced if they have not experienced that deep kind of marginalization from the moment they're born, from the moment they begin to move through the world, it may not occur to them that others are not living the same, as freely as they are, right? So if you've been othered for as long as you know, before you can truly feel like you can express yourself with any freedom. And I think that is a very difficult thing to do for anyone, right? Going back to that thing at the very beginning of our conversation about authenticity and what the heck is that to begin with, and how do you find it? How do you become it? How do you own it, live it?
Yeah. And it's really, really hard to be authentic in a world that is systematically biased against you.
Yes. That is telling you in one way or another that you're wrong, right?
Yeah. And like, it is not always safe for people to be completely authentic in every single space, which is why having safer spaces is so important for people to be able to let their guard down a little and relax in a space they know that's for them.
So I can't wait to see Writing Rainbow evolve, and I can't wait. Would you not consider anything online or virtually oriented?
Right now, I'm working on developing online programming for ACDR. So I'm working on online programming for the AIDS Committee of Durham Region Youth Outreach stuff. So I have a bunch of different programs that normally run in person that I have to consider, how do we run these digitally? So I'm kind of focusing on that first. Yeah, I know. The first one that's coming up, though, is Camp Rainbow Phoenix, where you and I first met all those years ago. Does have virtual camp this year. It does. And ACDR is actually the PFLAG's main partner in delivering camp. Camp actually began because ACDR and PFLAG built it together back in 2010 or something.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So, over the years, PFLAG's role in coordinating it has grown, and they are awesome. And ACDR has remained a partner the whole time. And what that means, well, it's a lot of logistical things that I'm not going to get into. But one of the things that I do for camp, that I did for the first time last year in my role as youth outreach coordinator, was I did a whole day's worth of activities around sexual health. So we had Sexual Health Jeopardy. We had a game based loosely on the game Assassin that was called Free the Patent, which was all about recapturing the patent for pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is an amazing medication that prevents the transmission of HIV if someone is taking it and they are HIV negative. So someone who does not have HIV, if they're on PrEP, cannot contract it through sex, which is pretty mind-blowing.
Wow.
I know. It's amazing. So I made a whole game around that, where one team was like the corporation that had the patent for PrEP, and the other team was the rebels who were going to take the patent and make sure that PrEP was free and available to all, and chased each other around the field, doing that and talking about PrEP. That game was inspired by the fact that the PrEP patent, the brand name Truvada, is held by a company in the States exclusively, and they use that to jack up the prices big time. It's like $2,000 a month in America to get these pills. In Canada, it is not as expensive. It's like if you are 21 and have medical benefits through Ontario, like the Ontario health program, it's free. But if you're over 21, you can get it. You can either just buy it outright for between $100 and $200 a month, or some insurance plans cover it. Anyway, it's a bit more complicated, but it's nowhere near as exploitative as the current situation in America.
Wow.
Anyway, so we're not sure yet, and I say we because I mean me and PFLAG, we're not sure quite yet how we're going to translate the camp experience virtually, but it will be, and it will be happening in the beginning of probably the second week of August. So yeah, keep an eye out for that on the at ACDR Youth Instagram page and also PFLAG Durham.
Amazing. I would. And if the living room can be of any support in that,
oh my God, yeah. We'll talk more about that after.
Okay, good. Now, speaking of games, and I know, and one so much, you do so much. Because I do, okay, there's two things. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the symbolism and the artwork that is behind you that you're working on. Because there's something beautiful that you do with your work. There's also just this fantastic research and symbolism archetypes. And then if we have time,
what was that? If we have time, what?
I might ask you about Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, heck yeah.
But maybe we'll have to save that for another chat. But to start,
you may have to have me back. But if we're going to start talking about symbolism, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the piece that you featured in the post.
Yeah, that's one of my
yeah, me too. So I'm going to turn my camera around briefly. This one.
Yes.
So this is my caribou deity, who is non-binary, and basically this artwork is part of a triptych, so a series of 3, which includes this is called Smooky Lives, and this is Mary Magpie. So all of these pictures are also up on my Instagram if you want to see them in a bit more detail, because I know they're going to be a little fuzzy right now. So these 3 pieces, I mentioned that I grew up Catholic. You can kind of see the influence, right? Very much influenced by sort of Catholic iconography and stained glass, which is a medium I can also do, by the way. I haven't done it in years, but I do know how to make stained glass artwork.
Okay.
So I wanted to do a series of pieces that sort of spoke to, I still love stained glass, and I still think that sort of the iconography that I grew up looking at in church was really, really beautiful. And that sort of influenced, I think, the style and the way that I draw things, particularly since I love using black outlines or just like thick, noticeable outlining when I make art. And I think that really comes from spending so much time staring at stained glass windows. But all of these pieces obviously are sort of not things you would see in a church. So we have Mary Magpie is sort of inspired by Mary Magdalene and also magpies. So magpies are a corvid, so they're very, very intelligent bird. And magpies are also, there's an egg here, magpies are known for being very fiercely protective of their nests. So I sort of wanted to draw Mary Magpie as this character who is very confident, very sexy, sexual, but also like with iconography that hints at being maternal as well. You know, the egg and the fact that magpies are so defensive of their nests. I think that often mothers are not allowed to be sexual beings, despite the fact that like that's one way that babies happen.
Yeah.
So I liked the idea of a figure who is both powerful, powerful in her sexuality, and also, you know, a fierce mom. And then we have Smooky over here. I wanted to do basically pin up art of Smooky, who is the mascot for he's the old mascot for MSM Outreach at the AIDS Committee of Durham Region. So MSM stands for Men Who Have Sex with Men. So it's, you know, essentially outreach that focuses specifically around education and prevention in the gay community, but also in the, you know, the full spectrum of sexualities, where people who identify as men also have sex with other men. Mm-hmm. And Smooky, I portrayed Smooky here as HIV positive. So he's got a blood drop in his hand, and the pose is borrowed from a very old painting of of Lazarus that has been, brought back to life by Jesus. So it's the idea that Smokey is alive and well and healthy. And that sort of is a reflection of the fact that being HIV positive today means a long and healthy life as long as you have access to treatment and are being treated well, are being appropriately supported by your care team. So,
amazing.
That's sort of the story behind this beefcakey gentleman.
The beautiful caribou.
Yeah, you can tell I have a caribou thing because this is also a caribou here.
And for those what is it?
Sorry?
Caribou piece, non-binary caribou deity?
So caribou are antlered, and in many species of antlered creatures, there is sexual dimorphism, where the female of the species does not have horns or antlers, and the male does. That is not the case for caribou. For caribou, all sexes of caribou have antlers. And in fact, in some cases, female caribou have larger antlers than male caribou do. And those antlers are not just used for, fighting, because they are, but they're used for foraging and
lots of things.
Lots of things that you would need antlers for. And I just love that. I love that. I'm obsessed with nature. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that the thing I post about most is pictures of nature. I find, because I am so detail oriented, focusing in on the little details of nature around me makes me feel really present, really grounded and connected and part of the earth in a way that's very, very comforting, as well as, makes me curious. I want to know more about the world that I live in. I want to know what the plants are. I want to know what they're called. I want to know what they do. I want to know if I can eat that. Can I eat that? I'd like to eat that. So yeah, I think that painting and drawing the natural world and photographing it and blending that with people kind of explores all of those concepts and mashes them together in a way that I think really speaks to me.
Yeah. If folks want to purchase or commission works, can they do that?
Yes, absolutely. You can just message me through Instagram for commissions and that sort of thing. The last thing that I was commissioned for was actually I sewed a dice bag. I have a highlight of that on my Instagram, but I made this beautiful quilted dice bag for D&D dice that had Swarovski crystals dangling from it, based on a character from a popular podcast.
Do I know this popular podcast or no, a different?
Do you listen to Critical Role or watch it on Twitch?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay, then you'll know it's Molly Mock. I made a dice bag based on Molly Mock. Oh. Molly Mock tea leaf.
Okay.
Long may he reign.
There's so much we could continue talking about, but where am I? Wow. Okay. On the list of things we were like, oh, we could talk about this, we could talk about this, we could talk about this. I don't know if we ever got around to depression.
Yeah. I mean, did you have a specific question?
Well, I know that I suffer from depression. A lot of folks out there will suffer. Maybe that's not the right word. I manage it. I have a relationship with it. R.I.P. Molly. Yes, sorry.
Pour one out. Sorry.
And the conversation about the journey, kind of the life's journey, how we find our way, how we feel, how we find ourselves on that journey. There might be folks out there who are struggling. There might be folks out there who are feeling alone and struggling with something similar. Is there any one thing that, looking back on where you were at and the things that you struggled with, that's something that you would tell yourself back in time? Anything, any message you'd send back to yourself? Kind of what you know now that you didn't.
Yeah, I think that something I do tell myself now that I think would have been useful long ago as well is that executive dysfunction is not my fault. So executive dysfunction is the formal term for when your brain is not producing the chemical reaction it normally would that rewards action. So most people with depression, myself included, don't produce enough dopamine or enough serotonin, or it's inconsistent. If you have ADHD, which I do, I don't produce a consistent level of dopamine. So sometimes I'm producing enough and sometimes it's not enough and sometimes so as a result, it is neurologically more difficult for me to complete an action or a task that I don't find inherently rewarding in some other way. So if something is creatively rewarding or resonates with my identity or, the thing that I am obsessed with at that time, those things are more rewarding and are also more neurologically rewarding and therefore easier, even if they're still hard, they are less hard to do, to start and to finish. And so I think that I used to think that the way I would get stuck was my fault, was a personality flaw, was something I was intentionally doing, that I was just, not trying hard enough or not pushing enough or, slacking off or any number of things that we tell ourselves. That concept of not enough is so damaging. And it is one that was very deeply ingrained in me by me. No one did that to me. I did that to myself. And I think that learning that executive dysfunction is not my fault really helped break me out of the feedback loop of this is my fault, which means I'm not trying hard enough, which means I have to try harder, which would just exacerbate it because it would just layer on the pressure.
The pain, it just kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So, learning it wasn't my fault and learning that I'm going to give you a book recommendation. You could always write it down later, but it's called the Adult ADHD Toolkit.
Okay.
Now, it's for ADHD, but I find it's really helpful for depression too, because depression, one of the major things about depression is that numbness, that, it's not even apathy. Like it's like you don't even have the will for apathy, that you would love to be doing things. You would love to be feeling things. You would really love that. That would be nice, but it feels very far away. And, strategies used for ADHD people to slowly build towards action or to build in action in small manageable steps are also very, very helpful for depression. So yeah, I really recommend like if I could go back and tell myself something, I'd start with that. And then I'd be like, gently grabs cheeks. You have ADHD. You don't have to tell anybody, but you should start reading about this. And also, you're not bad at math. You just need a computer.
Sarah, it's been amazing having you as a guest on the show today. I'm beginning to.
Oh, hell yeah!
That's where I'm at right now in pandemic. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to chat with us and share all this amazingness. Again, and I should say thank you to the ACDR for letting you do this as well during the day.
Thanks, boss.
It's just, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. I love what you do. And if there's any way the living room can help continue to support that or serve that journey in any way, please.
Likewise. We are neighbors. We're literally across the street, our offices, and we serve a lot of the same people. And I want to keep doing that. So
we'll do what we can with what we have, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one piece of the puzzle at a time. Oh, lovely. Any other shout outs you want to give before we wrap this?
Um, um, there's so many people I feel like I could shout out. I did make a little tiny list
Oh,
of some local Instagram accounts that are doing a lot of work around, well, one, here we go. I don't know if you can see this.
you know what I'm
Is it,
the
it's backwards?
you hold it up, I'll flip it after. Or
Okay.
yeah, we'll figure out a way to flip
We'll flip it after, but basically this is a few different local Instagram accounts
it. Okay.
where it's QT BIPOC Durham, which is the PFLAG Durham QT BIPOC group, which is still pretty brand new, and you should definitely give them some support. The Women of Color Durham Collective, which is also an amazing resource and a local group who is doing a ton of work. Shailene was the person who organized the protest in Oshawa a few weeks ago, which was so powerful and really well organized and just amazing. So definitely, if nothing else, go to her account and watch the videos of the protest because, yeah, it was really, really good. And I hope to see more things like it happening in Durham region, not just Oshawa, but all over.
Yeah.
I also have diversity at Durham College on there, especially if you're a student. A lot of the people involved in running that are great. And you can get in touch with the Black Student Success Network through them, which is also a super good resource. There's ACDR Bacco, who is my manager, and also the Black African Caribbean Community Outreach work from ACDR, which is super important. And lastly, but not leastly, an art thing on the very bottom is Create My Art Story, which is Georgia Fullerton. She's a local artist. I think she's great. She was the curator who got my art in at Oshawa City Hall back in March, and she's fantastic. So yeah, those are some local recs.
We interviewed her. She was one of the first live streams we did, but it was before how to record them, so we weren't able to save it. So I'm gonna have to reconnect with Georgia and see if we can do another chat as well. Oh, that's amazing. Sarah, thank you so much. Wow, what a giving, such a generous chatting experience with you.
Thank you again for having me. I'm always glad to talk to you, Mary. You're great. I'll come back anytime. And thank you everybody for watching. I'm glad you could be here.
Yes, thank you. Okay. I will release you, Sarah. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye. Oh, hello and goodbye, I guess, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us and listening to such a fabulous conversation with Sarah. I'll try and share all those links with everyone later on Instagram and over on our Facebook page. And we're looking forward to connecting with you again real soon. I think next week we're going to take I think I'm going to take the first part of the week off. So I don't know if we'll have another Instagram live stream next Tuesday, but we'll be catching up the following week with another amazing interview. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. And again, until we can connect and create with one another again in person, I really look forward to creating and connecting with you here online. So we'll see you soon. Have a wonderful week. And if you feel like joining us tomorrow on Facebook for our live stream hangout, that is a thing, and it is happening from 2 p.m. until 3:30 on Facebook. So feel free to drop by, say hi, and make some art with us if you like. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful, 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 wonderful day.